Just turned 22 when I first crossed paths with Michael. It was one of those Saturday mornings when you leave the house without any hurry, just to breathe a little, and destiny decides to appear out of nowhere. I was in the bookstore downtown, flipping through some books when I felt someone watching me. I looked up, and there he was, smiling in a way that made my stomach do a somersault. "Sorry to bother you, but didn't you drop this?" He held a bookmark that wasn't even mine, but I said yes anyway. Silly, right? But it was our first contact, our first innocent little lie that turned into a story to tell our friends. Michael had a way of making me feel special from the very first encounter. It wasn't just his appearance, although he was very handsome. It was the way he paid attention to every word I said, as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. After a few weeks of meeting for coffee, he invited me to dinner. I spent hours choosing an outfit, putting on lipstick, taking off, and putting on different earrings. Dinner was perfect. He took me to a small Italian restaurant, one of those with candles on the tables and soft music. We talked about everything and nothing at the same time. He told me he was an accountant, that he had recently graduated, that he lived alone in an apartment near his work. I talked about my pedagogy studies, my dream of having my own school one day, how much I loved reading old novels. "You have a sparkle in your eyes when you talk about the things you love," he said, playing with his wine. I felt my face warm up instantly. No one had ever noticed that about me before. The months that followed were like living in a romantic movie. Michael would show up at my house with flowers, take me for walks in the park, spend hours on the phone with me just to hear about my day. My mother adored him. My friends kept saying how lucky I was to have found a man like him. And I completely agreed. It was he who suggested that we move in together after a year of dating. "It makes sense, doesn't it?" he said one night while we were watching a movie on the couch at my house. We already spend so much time together anyway. My heart raced. It was what I most wanted to hear. We found a small but cozy apartment in the neighborhood we both liked. I remember staying up some nights, just watching him sleep beside me, thinking how lucky I was. We were one of those couples that people saw on the street and commented, "What love. What harmony." Michael was attentive in a way that made me swoon. He would come home with chocolate when I was sad, remember all my important appointments, help me with my school tasks. On Sundays we made pancakes together, listening to loud music and laughing at any silly thing. "I think I want to spend the rest of my life like this," he told me one morning, kissing my forehead while I was still half asleep. I smiled, pulled him closer and whispered, "Me too." It seemed like we had found our formula for happiness. After 2 years of living together, Michael surprised me with a marriage proposal in the same park where we used to walk. It wasn't anything too elaborate. He simply stopped in the middle of the walk, knelt down and said, "Will you marry me?" I didn't even let him finish the sentence properly. I was already screaming yes and jumping into his arms. The wedding took place in March 2015. It was exactly as I had always dreamed it would be. Simple, but full of love. My mother cried throughout the entire ceremony. My friends threw rose petals, and Michael couldn't stop smiling. During the vows, he said I was the most incredible woman he had ever met, and that he promised to make me happy every day of our lives. I believed every word. The honeymoon was in Gramado. We stayed in a small inn, ate fondue, took thousands of photos. I stored every moment in my memory, every laugh, every kiss, every "I love you" whispered in the dark. When we returned, I felt complete. I had found my place in the world, and it was by Michael's side. Married life started even sweeter than I had imagined. Michael continued to be the loving husband he had always been, surprising me with little things. A note on the fridge, my favorite coffee, a massage after a tough day at work. I graduated in pedagogy a few months after the wedding and got a job at a private school near home. Everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place. It was about a year later that Michael received an offer that would change everything, although I didn't know it at the time. His boss offered him a promotion. He would manage a new office that the company was opening. The salary was better, the responsibility greater, and best of all, it was only 15 minutes from home. "It's the opportunity I've been waiting for," he told me excitedly over dinner. "I'll have my own team, my own clients. It's an important step in my career." I was thrilled with him, happy to see him so excited. It never crossed my mind that this promotion would be the beginning of the end of everything. Michael took on the new position in January. At first, he came home talking about how challenging it was to set up the office structure, hire people, organize processes. He seemed fulfilled, and I felt proud of him. "My husband, the manager," I joked, and he laughed, pulling me into a hug. It was in March that he told me about the new hire. "I need an assistant," he said, fiddling with his notebook at the kitchen table. "Someone to help me with organization, answer the phone, that kind of thing. I found a candidate who seems good, a girl who just graduated in administration. Her name was Emma." Michael talked about her a few times during the first weeks, how she was adapting well, how organized she was, how she had interesting ideas to improve some processes. I listened without paying much attention. It was normal for him to talk about work. He had always done that. But after a while, I noticed that the name Emma came up too often in conversations. Emma suggested this. Emma organized that. Emma had a brilliant idea today. At first I found it funny, then it started to bother me a little, but I pushed those thoughts away. I was being silly, jealous, without reason. The changes in Michael's behavior were subtle at first. He was still affectionate, but there was something different. He spent more time on his phone, brought work home more often, arrived a little later some nights. When I asked about his day, his answers became vaguer, less detailed. One night, while we were watching television, his phone beeped with a message. He looked quickly and put the device in his pocket. "Who was it?" I asked casually. "Oh, work," he replied, but he didn't look me in the eyes. It was the first time I felt a strange pang in my stomach. I started paying more attention to the little things. Michael had always been careful with his appearance, but I noticed he was dressing up even more for work. He wore different perfumes, shirts I didn't know, cut his hair more often. When I commented on the new shirt, he said Emma had suggested that the color suited him. "Emma said that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "How did she suggest it?" Michael turned a little red and replied that it was just a comment during lunch, that she had complimented the color of the shirt he was wearing the day before. I nodded, but that information kept hammering in my mind. The business trip started around that time. Michael explained to me that as a manager, he needed to visit clients in other cities, attend important meetings. It was natural, it was part of his new position. What made me uncomfortable was knowing that Emma always accompanied him on these trips. "Why does she need to go along?" I asked one night when he was packing for another 2-day trip. "She's my assistant," he replied, as if it were obvious. "I need someone to take notes, organize the schedule, take care of the details. It's work, love." I wanted to believe it was just work. I tried to push away the bad thoughts that started to appear in my mind. Michael was my husband, he loved me, he would never give me a reason to doubt. But there was something in the air, a bad feeling that I couldn't explain. It was as if a shadow had settled over our marriage and I didn't know how to make it go away. The bad feeling that had been with me for weeks exploded on a Wednesday in June. I was at home, preparing dinner. I was going to make lasagna, Michael's favorite dish, when I felt such strong anguish that I had to stop what I was doing and sit down. My heart raced, my hands began to tremble, and a voice in my head screamed that something was wrong. I tried to calm down, take a deep breath, continue chopping the tomatoes for the sauce, but the feeling only got worse. It was as if someone was squeezing my chest from the inside, slowly suffocating me. Suddenly an image appeared in my mind, Michael in the office with Emma. It wasn't a normal image of work, it was something more intimate, closer. I dropped the knife on the sink and grabbed the car keys. I didn't even think about what I was doing, I just knew I needed to go to Michael's office at that moment. The 15-minute drive seemed like an eternity. My stomach churned, my head throbbed, and I couldn't stop imagining horrible scenarios. The building where the office was located was small, only 3 floors. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling as heavy as if it were made of lead. On the 2nd floor, I could see the glass door of the office. There was light on, the curtains were closed. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The scene I saw destroyed my world in a second. Michael was kissing Emma, his hands on her face, both of them embraced near the desk. They separated when they heard the door open, and the expression of panic on their faces confirmed everything I already knew in my heart. Emma ran away, literally. She grabbed her bag, passed by me without looking me in the eyes, and went down the stairs, almost tripping. I stood there, looking at Michael, waiting for him to say something, anything that could explain what I had just seen. "It's not what you're thinking," were his first words. How cliché, right? I almost laughed, but I was too busy trying to process the reality. My husband, the man who promised to love me forever just 2 years ago, was cheating on me with his assistant. "It's not what I'm thinking," I repeated, my voice coming out higher than normal. "And what am I thinking, Michael?" He turned red, stuttered some meaningless words, tried to approach me. I took a step back. I didn't want him to touch me. I drove home on autopilot. I don't remember thinking about anything specific during the drive. My mind was blank, as if it had shut down to protect itself. It was only when I sat on the living room couch that reality hit me like a runaway train. My marriage was over. The man I loved, the man I trusted completely, had betrayed me in the most cliché way possible. Michael came home an hour later. I was in the same place, still wearing the kitchen apron, still smelling of onion on my hands. He sat beside me, tried to hug me, started with the classic script of the unfaithful husband. He was confused, didn't know how it happened, loved me more than anything, was going to end everything with Emma. It would never happen again. "How long?" was the only thing I could ask. He took a while to answer. 2 months, he whispered. 2 months, 8 weeks, 60 days of lies, of kisses on my face after kissing another, of false "I love yous," of pretending to be happy by my side. The physical pain I felt at that moment was worse than anything I had ever experienced. I couldn't stay in the same house as him that night. I grabbed some clothes, threw them in a suitcase, and went to my mother's house. She didn't ask questions when she saw me at the door. Crying, she just hugged me and took me inside. I spent the night awake, looking at the ceiling of my teenage bedroom, trying to understand how my life had turned upside down in a matter of hours. Michael called about 20 times the next day. He sent messages, showed up at the school where I worked, tried to talk to my mother. I didn't want to hear it. There was nothing he could say that would change what had happened. The trust had been broken, and I knew I would never be able to glue it back together. The separation process was more complicated than I imagined. We had joint accounts, loans, plans for the future that turned to dust. Michael tried to be gentlemanly in the division of assets, but I found out that he had spent a considerable amount of our money on dinners and gifts for Emma. There was even a beach trip he said was a work seminar, but which was actually a romantic weekend with her. The pain of betrayal was different from anything I had ever felt. It wasn't just sadness. It was a mix of anger, humiliation, disappointment, and emptiness. I felt stupid for not having noticed earlier, for having believed all the lies, for having been so naive. At the same time, I felt a painful longing for the life I thought I had, for the marriage I believed was real. The following months were the hardest of my life. I couldn't sleep properly, had no appetite, cried for any reason. I lost weight quickly. In 2 months, I had lost 18 pounds. My mother was always worried, trying to make me eat, convincing me to leave the house. But I just wanted to stay in my room, under the covers, pretending that the outside world didn't exist. Work became my refuge and my torture at the same time. On the one hand, it was the only place where I could concentrate on something other than my pain. On the other hand, seeing the couples of parents of my students